In this demo, we're going to take a look at configuring, or just some initial configuration that we have to do with NAP. So what we're looking at in here is we're looking at, of course, again, the Server Manager. Server Manager is the place where you're going to be going to do your configuration tasks, at least the initial ones with NAP. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go down to our roles on here, and you can see we have, and I'll move this over for you, you can see that we have a number of roles already configured on this system. So these we've gone through and added in, and we're just going to go ahead and build on top of these. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to Network Policy and Access Services. I have my Network Policy Server here. I'm going to expand this out, and you can see my Network Policy Server does include Network Access Protection. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to configure, just basic network access protection. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do the easy way. I'm going to use the wizard to do this. The way I do it is I'm going to go through and say configure NAP. And it's going to say, okay, I'm going to help you out with this. This is a wizard that helps you go through and get some initial stuff with NAP deployed. So what I'm doing on here is it's saying, okay, how do you connect? How is this going to work? Well, I'm going to use this to work with, in this case, I'll say with DHCP. And it's going to say, okay, this is a DHCP NAP connection policy. What are you going to name it? I'll just leave the default in there, but I could drop my own name. I'm not going to be concerned with that for this demo, but I could name it whatever I want. So I'm going to go through and click next, and it's going to say, okay, you're going to go through and configure it to work with, in this case, Radius. Now, I already have a Radius client here. I've added that in. So I'm going to click next. DHCP scopes that can work with this. I can add in a DHCP scope. What I have to do is I have to go through. In this case, I'll say I have a DHCP scope, and I'll say my NAP scope. Now, what you want to do is pay attention here. I don't have a scope that is NAP enabled right now, so I would want to go through and do that. Well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to go through and click next. Next thing, am I going to what computer is going to work with? I'm going to deny or allow groups of computers. If I don't want to work with computers on here, and I don't want to block or allow certain machines, I don't have to put anything here. But take a look. If I don't specify what machines are allowed to use this and which ones are not, it won't validate them, in which case it's going to revert back to any user that goes in and works with this system. So that's fine. I'll go ahead and click next. And then where is the remediation server? If this thing doesn't comply to NAP policies, where is it? Well, I don't really have one set up, so I'll just say a new group. And if I had a group already set up, I would go through and say, remedial group, I'll say in here. I'll add that in, and I'll say this is the remediation server, server 1, and I'll put in the IP address in there. I'm not worried this is the address and name is correct for this demo on here. In fact, I'll change this to server 2. I'm not worried if this is correct for here because I only have the one server and I'm showing you how to configure it. So I'm going to click OK, and I'll assume that this is the remediation server and that works. I'll click OK on that. So I won't worry about configuring this. What this does down here, this troubleshooting URL, is this just helps users if they have a problem and they're not in compliance. This is something that they can go through, and it will give them this URL they can go to and say, well, guess what? This is what happened, and this is how you can fix it. It's optional. I don't have to put it in there. So I click next, and it says, okay, how are you going to validate these systems? This is the SHV, the System Health Validator it's going to use. Now, right now I only have the one installed, the Windows Security Health Validator, so it's going to go ahead and use this to check the compliance of the system, and if it's not in compliance, it will go through and do an auto remediate, which will mean it will go through and update the system and make sure bring it into compliance if those resources are available, and then go through and let it move ahead. Now, this is of interest down here. If you have a client that is not compatible with NAP, it's not eligible for doing NAP remediation or compliance. What are you going to do with those systems? Well, you can see the default on here. If you're deploying NAP and a client is not compatible with NAP, what's it going to do? Well, right now it's going to say, well, I'm going to deny you access to the network because I can't validate if you're in compliance or not, so you can't come on the network, in which case you get access to the restricted network and whatever resources are there. However, I could go the other route and say, well, if I can't validate you, well, no harm, no foul, I'll let you in. So we're not worried about that. We're going to go ahead and say deny. I'll click next, I'll validate the actual information, and I'll assume everything's correct. I click finish, and it's gone through and created an actual configured NAP to work with a DHCP at this point. I could go through, and I'll expand this out. I could go through and apply additional policies if I wanted, which I'm not concerned about at this point, but I could definitely do that and make it even more secure. But at this point, we've configured one basically for DHCP, and we'll go ahead and go on into our next section.